The sixth winter on Cathara Ridge is the one I stop counting days. That is what solitude does, eventually. It does not break you. It simply removes the scaffolding you built to pretend time has direction. I had my routines, the morning calibration of the relay antenna, the afternoon log entry into a system I doubted anyone still read, the evening meal eaten alone at the single table by the window. I had the silence of the snowpack and the occasional groan of the cabin's old struts settling against the cold. I had enough. I had retired to the relay station because the resettlement authority had dissolved, and I had nowhere else my name meant anything. 31 years processing residency files for colonial outposts. 31 years of names and numbers, and the particular loneliness of knowing exactly how little a document can do and how much. When the authority folded, they gave us severance and a letter of commendation and nothing else. I took the posting at Cathara because it was remote, and because remote suited what I had become. I was not expecting the child. She came on a morning in what I calculated was the 43rd day of the deepest cold, when the temperature outside would kill an unprotected adult in under 2 hours. I heard the sound at the door before I heard the door itself, a sound too small and too slow for wind, too deliberate for settling timber. I put down my calibration tool and stood. She was on her knees in the snow when I opened the door, small, lavender-skinned, which meant Varath. I had processed enough of their residency filings to know the coloring. Silver hair plastered to her face by the wet cold. Her eyes, when she looked up at me, were amber and very wide, and they held the particular quality of a creature that has been walking for a long time and has simply stopped walking. She held, in both hands pressed to her chest, a small carved figurine. Bone, I thought, old. I did not ask questions. I brought her inside. She did not speak my language, and I did not speak hers. I had processed Varath files for years, but I had never learned the spoken tongue, only the administrative codes. She sat at my table wrapped in 2 of my heaviest blankets, and drank the broth I put in front of her, and watched me with those amber eyes. She did not cry, she did not flinch. She was exhausted in the way that goes past feeling, and she was here, and that was the whole of the situation. I sent a query into the Lowland Network that evening, because I am not a sentimental woman, and I wanted to understand what I had. The Varath settlement at the Ridge's southern base had recorded a severing. That is their word. I knew it from the administrative codes. The category that marks a child whose lineage claim has been formally dissolved by a kinship council. Her mother had died in circumstances the council judged dishonorable. The child had no registered kin willing to absorb her. The kinship council had assigned her to a placement registry for labor collectives in the outer settlements. The filing date was 3 weeks prior. The child had been walking since then, I calculated. 3 weeks, through the pre-winter passes, in clothing that was never meant for this altitude. I sat with that information for a long time. In the morning I went to the single locked drawer in my desk, the one I had not opened since I arrived at Cathara, and I took out the files I had carried with me. Old habit, or old guilt. When the authority dissolved, I had taken paper copies of several unexecuted documents, because I could not stand the thought of them simply vanishing into a defunct system. One of them was a residency sponsorship I had drafted for a child named Eris Vorn, a Varath boy who had died of fever in the transit camp, before the document could be formally lodged. The sponsorship had never been entered into the permanent record. It existed only in my desk drawer, and in whatever backup the authorities' archive had half processed and abandoned. I looked at it for a long time. Then I took out my pen, a physical pen, the kind no one uses anymore, and I made 2 changes: the name, the identifying descriptors in the secondary field. I had processed enough of these to know exactly where the system would look and what it would accept. I signed it with my full authority credentials, which had technically lapsed, but which the archive system would not flag for another administrative cycle, because the authority's shutdown protocols had been badly managed and several verification nodes were still running on the old permissions. I sent it into the archive that same morning, through the relay antenna I calibrated every day, into a system I doubted anyone still read. The Varath recovery party arrived 9 days later. There were 3 of them, in a low-altitude crawler, dressed in the formal gray of kinship enforcement. Their lead speaker was a tall woman with copper skin and close-cropped white hair, and she spoke to me in careful trade common through the doorway, because I did not invite them inside. She told me they had a registered claim on a severed child, lineage code such and such, and that under Varath compact articles, the child was required to be remanded to the placement registry. I told her the child was registered as a dependent of a former resettlement authority officer under an active sponsorship filing, and that under colonial welfare protocol, any authority-sponsored dependent was exempt from kinship council placement orders pending a welfare audit, and that the audit process, once triggered, would involve a review panel drawn from 3 separate compact signatories, and that I would be happy to provide her with the filing timestamp and reference number. The tall woman looked at me for a long time. She asked if I understood what I was doing. I told her I had processed residency files for 31 years, and I understood documents very well. They did not come inside. They stood by their crawler for a while, conferring in the Varath tongue. Then the tall woman turned back to me and said something I had to ask her to repeat, because my trade common had grown rusty. She said, "The council will challenge this." I said, "They are welcome to." I said, "The audit process will take approximately 14 months. I said, "I look forward to the correspondence." They left before the afternoon storm closed the pass. I do not know what happened to the filing after that. The authority archive was a half-dead thing running on protocols no one was maintaining, and the audit process I had cited was real, but I had no certainty anyone would actually convene the panel. The sponsorship document was legitimate. The credentials were mine. The form was correct. The timestamp was genuine. But legitimate and effective are 2 different things, and I had spent 31 years learning the distance between them. I sent a copy to every archive node I could still reach through the relay. I sent a copy to the Colonial Welfare Compact Office, which may or may not still have a functioning intake channel. I sent a copy to the Varath Compact Liaison Office in the Lowland Settlement, addressed formally, and logged into their public receipt system, so that any subsequent action on the child would generate a paper trail that an audit board, if one ever convened, would have to account for. Then the storm closed in for the rest of the winter, and there was nothing more I could do. Her name, I learned over the following weeks, was something that did not translate cleanly. I called her Shy, which was the closest sound I could manage, and she accepted this without complaint. She learned my routines before she learned my words. The morning calibration, the afternoon log, the evening meal. She sat at the table and watched everything I did with the same amber attention she had turned on me the morning I pulled her from the snow. She kept the bone figurine on the windowsill. I never asked about it. Some things are not mine to ask. Spring came late that year, the way it always does on the ridge. The snowpack retreated in stages, sullen and slow. No one came back up the pass. No correspondence arrived that I could verify had been read. I did not know whether the document had held, whether anyone had challenged it, whether the audit panel had been convened or ignored, or quietly buried in the collapse of the authorities' remaining infrastructure. I knew I had done the thing that was mine to do. The morning the first meltwater ran from the roof, Shy stood at the window and watched it for a long time, and then she looked at me with those amber eyes and said a single word in her language. I did not know the word. She did not explain it. She went back to watching the water run, and I went back to the morning calibration, and the relay antenna sent its signal into whatever part of the network was still listening. She was still there. That was the whole of it. Some things you do not do because you are certain they will hold. You do them because you are the one standing in the doorway, and the snow is coming, and the child is on her knees, and there is a drawer in your desk with your name still on it. You do them because it is the only work left that means anything at all.